Reverend Eric Moeller here. Welcome back to this lesson in rock and roll liberation. Let's continue our journey through this paper, Born to Run, an expression of the divine liberative movement that is rock and roll. Alan Freed said, rock and roll is a river of music that has absorbed many streams. All have contributed to the big beat. The source of these streams may very well be in humanity's beginnings. There has always been a musical impulse within us that perhaps is part of the image of God that we all bear. The oldest instrument that we have is a 50,000-year-old flute, possibly made by a Neanderthal. One Native American tradition holds that Sky Woman danced solid earth into being on mud on the back of a turtle in gratitude for the way that the world's creatures rescued and received her. According to an Abenaki legend, the creator heard a loud boom shortly after the earth's creation and went to investigate. Arriving at the source of the thunderous sound, he asked, "Who are you?" The reply was swift. "I am the spirit of the drum. I would like to accompany the singing of the people." In these traditions, music was present at the very beginnings of life, the beginning of creation. Now, later in history, indigenous dance and music was a form of resistance to deadly, oppressive colonial powers in places like Brazil and Peru and in North America. The spirit was certainly in the black music of New Orleans' Congo Square, brought here from Africa, which echoes in the Bo Diddley beats of She's the One on Born to Run. The spirit was certainly in the black songs of Southern fields, where music was a comforter and communicator and liberator in the midst of slavery and Jim Crow. That music shaped Sam Phillips in Alabama and Elvis in Mississippi until they collided in Memphis and something new came into being. The Big Bang, in Bruce's words. In his autobiography, Bruce writes of Elvis's performance on Ed Sullivan, saying, "It was all there in his eyes, his face, the face of a Saturday night jukebox Dionysus, the shimmying eyebrows and the rocking band. A riot ensued. Women and young girls and many men screaming for what the cameras refused to show, for what their very timidity confirmed and promised. Another world, the one below your waist and above your heart. A world that had been previously and rigorously denied was being proven to exist. It was a world with all of us in it, together, all of us." In due time, as our nation continued to struggle against institutionalized racism in the South, and Kennedy was assassinated, the spirit moved in England, and the Beatles and the Stones came into prominence. In the words of Little Stephen, the Beatles showed us a new world. The Rolling Stones invited us in. Other currents were naturally flowing all the time before and beyond rock and roll's advent. Music born from the impoverished of the Appalachian Hills and other white rural spaces became country music, a major early tributary of rock and roll. Folk, soul, R&B, and Motown, they all fed into and were nurtured by rock's mighty river. Reggae and ska were currents of expression of impoverished and oppressed people in Jamaica, and later unifiers of working-class youth in England across racial lines. Punk rock would come into being in the late 70s, and punk was at the very least marginally inspired by Bruce, when the experience of Bruce's Hammersmith performance on the Born to Run tour would directly influence Joe Strummer's notions of what a live performance ought to be. And punk rock would shapeshift in life-giving, liberative ways over decades in New York, D.C., and East Bay, in Southern California, and Boston, and elsewhere, and abroad in England and East Germany, and beyond. Over and over again, always and everywhere it seems, songs appear to people who generally would qualify as poor or oppressed in some way. They capture and share this music, and life-affirming, liberating movements come alive. In 1974, the spirit began to move in a new way in New Jersey. It was another bleak moment in the experience of our country. Of his context and how it shaped Born to Run, Bruce writes, I was a child of Vietnam-era America, of the Kennedy, King, and Malcolm X assassinations. The country no longer felt like the innocent place it was said to be in the Eisenhower 50s. Political murder, economic injustice, and institutionalized racism were all powerfully and brutally present. This was the new lay of the land. Bruce grew up pretty near poor, in an environment where he witnessed racialized issues, and through his father, he experienced the toll extracted from working people and their families for the sake of corporate profits. So by 1974, Bruce was a struggling musician with 2 records under his belt, working in the midst of this landscape. And then it comes to him, a title. And I think that's where we'll leave it for this episode. I hope you'll join us for the next episode as we dive into the specifics of Born to Run as an expression of God's liberative movement through rock and roll. In the meantime, keep on, my friends, keep on.